Hey everyone, this is Kandace and Sher with Processing Trauma Out Loud. Sher, you and I have been having the discussion before the discussion. And what we want to bring this week and possibly next week too is this thought. What does setting boundaries look like from a trauma-informed perspective? You framed it that way before we pushed record, and I just thought, oh yeah, that sums up what we really want to discuss here for the next 20 or so minutes because we think it's so important. I mean, it is a lot of the work that we're doing around our stories.
Yeah. And just how we've been talking a lot between ourselves, how much of a difference it has made in our lives and can make in the whole world when there is a trauma informed presence. And how the way that we approach somebody who is struggling changes completely when we come from that perspective of being aware that usually there's more going on below the waterline than we recognize unless we're kind of looking for it, which
Mhm.
once you're trauma informed and the more you kind of swim in these waters, like we are aware of it. And so we will pick up a little bit more quickly. When is a part involved? Or when is somebody being triggered because of past harm? And so being trauma informed affects all the ways that we offer care and offer care to ourselves too.
Yeah. I think one of the ways that has affected me the most is not so much the information, although that totally has. It's the posture that I was met with in looking at my stories with such a lens of kindness and non-judgment, as opposed to, maybe looking from a distance of why is this person so shut down and so isolated and doesn't do anything to get connections? Or why is this person always in the middle of a drama and has all these relationship struggles in the context of being in relationship? And man, like, wow, that has caused me to really slow down because of the work that I went through with understanding my own stories when it comes to boundaries.
Yes, and it's like we are when we encounter a trauma informed guide,
Mhm.
they're guiding us back to our true self that is buried beneath so many levels of, on one hand, establishing walls because we're really afraid of being hurt again and the whole world can seem dangerous. And then on the flip side, like working really, really hard and trying really, really hard to make sure that everybody's really, really happy so that, again, we don't get that overload of, of harm that feels just too much. And so when we have experienced complex PTSD, danger is a real thing. Like we feel it at a very acute subconscious level. We're not always consciously aware of it, but subconsciously, I mean, it is right there. Our body can smell it before we often will even consciously be aware of it. But so beginning to recognize like what do we do when we're in situations that our body or our brain tell us are dangerous? And of course, we that goes to trust issues and how able we are to take risks, how often our defensiveness rises up, all the ways that we move towards self-protection in ways that, again, I will just say, often end up locking out the things that we long for most, which is connection and care and love and support and all the good things that can occur when we actually have healthy boundaries.
One thing that happens when we get into our stories, going back to, childhood as early as we can remember, and having the guide helping us, even when we don't remember all the details. But we can get a feel for in childhood, was our caregivers anxious and kind of looking to us, even starting to depend on us to do something for them, where we felt consumed? Or were they more distant, shut down, and didn't provide any type of validation or reassurance for us? We will, as we grow older, even though it feels dangerous, we actually, the familiar, which is dangerous, is actually what we end up being drawn towards, because we are still trying to close that loop. So
Yeah.
if we, that loop of really developmental trauma, where we did not learn how to set healthy boundaries or even know what healthy boundaries are. So I think I want to just bring it back to that for a second, because here's what I like to sit in for myself. None of that is your fault.
Mm,
Oh, but it is becoming our responsibility to heal those wounds that came from either our boundaries being violated, right? Or or not getting our needs met, to where we're anxiously and trying to get someone to pay attention to us.
yeah. Our lives are formed around that relationally, really. It's so true, Candace. And it's like we talk a lot about attachment styles from the perspective of what are my attachment styles. And you and I have talked about this quite a bit on the podcast.
Mhm.
What were the attachment styles of our parents and primary caregivers? As you're saying, were they anxious? Were they avoidant? Were they ambivalent? What were we dealing with? And the ways then that as children, we were required either to show up or get out of the way.
Right.
I mean, this is huge in still for us. How many years later, to some degree, we still deal with that. That's our struggle with how we show up in relationships today, and what we do with our boundaries, and how able we feel now to take risks. And the more that we work with someone who is trauma informed, and then in our case, really experience the goodness of communities that are trauma informed, where we can show up and make mistakes and there is repair. And I mean, this really changes us and gives us an increase in the level of resilience, so that when we are hurt, we don't crumble or we don't react with having to just throw up a wall, but we have the fortitude and the strength now to say, like, okay, that really stings. Ooh, I'm going to take a breath. I might talk it out. And then how do I want to respond from a place now of now that I'm back in the window of tolerance and I have regulated my emotions and my body? Like, now, how can I think this through and make a decision? But yeah, if we don't have that kind of help, it's really, you said the word, it's not your fault, but then it becomes our responsibility. And that's such a profound statement, Candace. Like, it's not our fault that this is what we're dealing with, but now, like, what are we going to do about it?
Mhm. I I'm feeling the grief of this a little bit in my
Hmm.
body.
Yeah.
When, I know in my own story, when I started working with my story work coach, understanding the effects of my disorganized attachment and what that meant in me, either closing people out or crossing their boundaries out of a frantic need for them not to abandon me. Like, there was a period of time where there was so much grief in that. I
Mm.
saw the effects of it over decades in my relationships. And even though I can't say, oh, I've arrived, I don't have any of that in my system anymore. I actually do, but now, like you said, I can breathe, I can slow down, I can ask myself questions, I can be curious if I have a little that that just needs to be reminded. Oh, we have these secure connections. You're not alone. And so it is safe to show up and use your voice, even if this person would abandon you.
Yeah,
You won't be alone.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you? Like when you began working with your story work coach and you had a more cohesive narrative of your um, relationship with boundaries, did you go through the grief of what that meant for you?
I think it's been such an ongoing journey. I think it took me so long before I could really kind of believe the truth about the intentionality of harm that was inflicted. And really, I will say for both parents, like I think there was intentionality there that just has been hard for me until even fairly recently. I feel like I'm still, even as we're having this conversation, and I'm thinking, you know, uh, I think I would have been very quick to name one of my parents avoidant and the other anxious. And just as we're kind of contemplating here this morning, I'm thinking, I think there might be a flip flop there. I think the one who maybe appeared a certain way was actually much more avoidant. And the one who appeared avoidant, I'm guessing, is very disorganized and ambivalent, both
Mhm.
anxious and avoidant. And so
Mm.
I feel like it's still such a learning thing for me. I think I'm still really learning how the relationships with my primary caregivers, my parents, how that still shows up in the ways that I relate today. And I would say for me, I was definitely in the camp of I could have really high walls if I perceive somebody as being dangerous, boom, a wall would go up. I would become avoidant. And I mean, I was just out. I was gone. I could not stay engaged in the relationship. Like I mean, I couldn't. I literally just, I was done. Wrongfully, I will say, I hurt people in my life because of that. I have regrets because of that. But that was my body just unable to stay in the presence of a relationship that felt unsafe to me.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
then there's the other side too, where I have been one to just go after and try and be and give and do, right? And so I think I've had to learn so much, and the voice of my coach has been, and I will say like my community now, because I'm taking a lot of risks, I feel like in my close relationships where I am showing up with a desire to be more and more real and to just put it out there like this is kind of where I'm at, this is what I'm feeling. And I mean it's taken me a long time to be able to do this and have a sense of I won't turn and run, and I am believing that they won't run. And
Yeah. Ah, that feels so redemptive
mhm,
for you.
mhm.
Yeah. Because I'm a witness of you doing this. And so it just,
Even this morning,
I'm
right, Candace?
smiling. So I'm smiling so big because,
Yeah.
yeah, just seeing you you're very gifted in many ways. And so as you're bringing that forward for other eyes to get to enjoy and see and soak in your beauty, your words, your paintings, whatever it is, it's a testament, Cher, that you've been doing a lot of work. And now, because you've done your work over things that weren't your fault, other people are getting to experience goodness through it.
Yeah. And then that makes me so happy.
It makes me happy too.
Because I love somebody asked, well, we were talking one day recently with one of our groups, what do you love most? And as I kind of sat there and pondered, I thought, I love being loved. Like there's nothing I love more than the feeling that I am genuinely known and seen and loved anyway. Like that is so beautiful. And so I love this, and this isn't perfect. I'm not at all trying to say like these communities are perfect. They're not. There is rupture, there is repair, and but to be able to show up and offer goodness and also receive goodness. I mean,
Mhm.
it's what my body and soul have longed for my whole life, and I'm getting good taste now, and I really love it.
Yeah, it's a redo for that little girl.
Mm,
It's so the reparenting is now when there are questions of boundaries that come up in you, because they do,
yeah,
and you you have a sense now of, okay, am I safe? Do I have any data or evidence that this is the old story? And and when you get to make a conscious choice now, no.
yeah,
So I'm going to be vulnerable and move forward. Or we know this. We know that there are some relationships that are harmful.
yeah,
And that alarm system that's going off in you is still there to protect you. That's a good part.
yeah, that's right.
That part that knew how to set up the wall was what protected you. But now you get to be with that part and kind of update her when, like, no, these connections truly are safe.
Yeah.
So that's so good.
Good.
I wonder if we can come back. I would love to further this conversation. I have something else of maybe that we can explore with what does it mean in the context of these one-on-one relationships. I have a thought here. So would you be willing to do that with me?
Absolutely, Candace. Can't wait to dive in.
Okay. Good to be with you today, friend. Love you.
Love you too, Candace.